She was a soldier soaked and silent, holding her daughter's hand, under the rain forgotten by the world. He was a single dad driving home through the storm, with no idea that a knock at his door would rewrite everything he thought he knew about love healing and second chances. This isn't just a story about helping a stranger. It's a story about the light we leave on for others, and sometimes for ourselves. If stories of kindness, quiet miracles, and unexpected love speak to your heart, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and join us for more real human stories that restore your faith in the good. Now, sit back, take a deep breath, and let's begin. The rain came down in sheets, not in drops, the kind of storm that blurred headlights soaked through denim and seemed to wash away the edges of the world. Rhett Callahan gripped the steering wheel of his old white pickup truck, squinting through the fogged windshield as the wipers struggled to keep up. Beside him, his 7-year-old daughter Ellie hummed quietly, legs swinging from the edge of her booster seat, tracing raindrops with her finger on the window. They had just left the community center after piano lessons, a weekly routine that was equal parts tradition and therapy. Rhett hadn't missed a lesson in over a year, not because Ellie was destined for Carnegie Hall, but because it was something his late wife Marlene had insisted on. And Rhett kept his promises. The road was nearly deserted, winding through the hills outside Blue Hollow, North Carolina. Trees swayed violently in the wind, and the mist clung to everything ghost-like and heavy. Rhett slowed down as he turned onto the gravel stretch near Sycamore Lane, and that's when he saw them. A woman in military fatigue, soaked to the bone, was walking along the roadside, her left arm shielding a small girl whose oversized hoodie was dripping wet. The child stumbled slightly, clinging to the woman's waist. Behind them, a duffel bag lay half slid off the shoulder of the adult, heavy dragging, almost defeated. Instinct spoke before thought could intervene. Rhett braked hard, causing Ellie to jolt slightly forward. "Everything okay, Daddy?" she asked, wide-eyed. Rhett didn't answer right away. He stared through the rain-spattered glass at the two figures ahead. Something, maybe it was the image of the child, or the exhaustion in the soldier's gait, lodged itself in his chest. He lowered the window and leaned out. "You folks all right?" he called. The woman turned, eyes cautious, lips pale. She had one of those faces not striking in the magazine sense, but strong, dignified, weathered. Her eyes, a steel gray, carried both fatigue and pride. "We're fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "Just trying to get to the shelter before it closes." Rhett looked at the girl. Her sneakers were soaked through her face, flushed from cold. No umbrella, no cover, no hope of reaching anywhere dry in this storm. "You're not gonna make it in this," Rhett said. He hesitated, then opened the door. "I'm not a creep. I've got a kid in the car. Come in. Get warm." The woman hesitated, her body tensing as if weighing every possible scenario. Ellie rolled down her window just enough to peek her head out and chirped, "It's okay. I have snacks." The soldier cracked the faintest smile. "She's persuasive." "I've got hot soup at home," Rhett added. "Not fancy, but real food. And a dry roof. That did it." She nodded curtly, then scooped the little girl into her arms and ducked into the back seat. "Name's Zara," she said. "This is Juniper. We call her June. I'm Rhett. That's Ellie. You're safe now." The ride to Rhett's cabin took less than 10 minutes, but in silence, it felt longer. The only sounds were the ping of raindrops on metal, and Ellie explaining in great detail why goldfish crackers were superior to pretzels. Zara didn't say much, but Rhett noticed the way her eyes flicked to every street sign and tree, as though mapping escape routes in her mind. Military for sure. And guarded. When they pulled into the driveway, Ellie jumped out and ran toward the porch. Rhett grabbed the spare towels from behind the seat and handed them to Zara. She looked stunned. "You didn't have to stop," she murmured. Rhett shrugged. "Yeah, well, Marlene wouldn't have let me keep driving. Zara blinked. Your wife? He nodded. Was. She passed 2 years ago. Zara didn't ask more. She just said, I'm sorry, and it sounded like she meant it. The cabin smelled of cedar rain and lentil soup. While Ellie and June disappeared into the living room as if they'd known each other forever, Zara sat stiffly at the edge of the kitchen bench, steam rising from her mug. She hadn't touched the soup yet. Rhett, standing near the stove, stirred another pot. He didn't look at her, but his voice was calm even. Where you coming from, Fort Campbell? Just discharged? Anywhere to go? She paused. Not really. Applied for housing assistance. No word yet. Rhett nodded slowly. And June's dad. Zara's jaw tightened. Never stuck around. It's just us. Rhett finally turned and looked her in the eye. Well, for tonight, it's 4 of us. After June fell asleep on the couch next to Ellie wrapped in a borrowed blanket, Zara stood on the porch, arms crossed, staring into the downpour. Rhett joined her, offering her a second cup of tea. The porch light's always on, he said. Zara looked at it, then at him. That a saying or something? No. It's a promise. She didn't reply, but something in her face softened. Not much, just a fraction. But Rhett noticed. He didn't ask for her story. He just let the rain fall. The steam rise and the quiet wrap around them like a beginning they didn't yet know they'd already stepped into. Morning came soft and golden like a whispered apology after a long night of sorrow. Rhett stood at the kitchen sink, mug in hand, watching the sunlight break through the last mist of rain clouds. The porch still glistened. The grass bowed under the weight of water. Everything smelled like pine and promise. Behind him, the small cabin was quiet, not the lonely kind, but the hushed, sacred stillness of something new trying to take root. Zara and June had taken the guest room, really a converted study with an old pull-out sofa and faded wallpaper Rhett had meant to replace years ago. He hadn't known guests would ever matter again. He heard soft footsteps, not Ellie's. He turned. Zara entered the kitchen, hair damp from the shower, wearing the same olive green thermal top and cargo pants from the night before. She carried herself like a soldier, still in uniform, even barefoot. Morning, she said cautiously. Coffee, Rhett offered. She hesitated. Only if it's real. He smirked. I make it strong enough to raise the dead. She took the cup from him with a nod that almost passed for gratitude. They stood in silence for a few moments, steam rising between them. Rhett noticed the faint scar above her eyebrow, the way her hand slightly trembled when she lifted the cup. Trauma lived in the body long after the war ended. You sleep okay? He asked. She nodded. Better than I have in weeks. June, she's still out. That's rare. She doesn't settle easily. Rhett leaned against the counter, arms folded. Ellie used to be the same. After Marlene died, she'd wake up crying most nights. Took a year before she made it through without needing me there. Zara glanced down. Kids are tougher than we think. But some nights. Yeah, Rhett said quietly. Some nights it breaks you. Later that morning, Ellie and June were sprawled out on the rug, drawing cats that looked like squirrels and giggling like they'd been best friends since birth. Zara stood by the door, watching them, her arms folded, but her expression softer. She hasn't laughed like that in months, she whispered. You've been moving a lot, Rhett asked. Too much. 3 states in a year. Between bases, couch surfing, waiting lists. The Army's great until you're not theirs anymore. He didn't press further. Instead, he said, You can stay here a while. It's not fancy, but there's space. The girls seem to like each other. Zara turned to him. I don't want to impose. You're not. She hesitated. Most people aren't this generous, especially not to someone with no address and a military duffel bag full of debt. Rhett shrugged. Most people haven't been where I've been. Zara looked at him long and hard. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't have to. That afternoon, Zara helped Rhett fix a loose gutter on the side of the house. She climbed the ladder without hesitation, hammer slung in one hand, as if she'd spent her life doing repairs instead of clearing minefields and loading cargo. Rhett handed her nails, amused by her quiet competence. "You do this often?" he asked. "Used to build shelters in sandstorms. This is a cakewalk," he chuckled. "You've got a dry wit." "I have to. My humor's the only thing they didn't issue me." By the time they finished, the air had turned cool. The girls were chasing frogs near the creek out back, barefoot and free. Zara stood beside Rhett on the porch, her eyes scanning the horizon. "You ever think about leaving here?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But it's where Ellie feels safe. And maybe I've had enough of starting over." She nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." As dusk fell, Rhett lit the porch lantern, something he'd done every night since Marlene passed. Not out of habit, but hope, like some old ritual for the broken-hearted. Zara watched him. "You light that every night, every night." She stared at the glow, her face unreadable. "Who's it for?" "Used to be for Marlene. Now," he paused, "maybe just for anyone who needs to find their way home." Zara looked away, her jaw tightening. "I used to believe in that kind of thing," she said softly. "You stopped. I stopped believing anyone was looking for me." A long silence followed. Then Rhett said, "Maybe they weren't. But you still found the light." She didn't reply, but the glint in her eyes said something was stirring. Maybe not belief, but the ache of wanting to. That night, as Rhett tucked Ellie into bed, she asked the question he'd half expected. "Is Miss Zara and June gonna stay here forever?" He smiled. "I don't know, kiddo. That's up to them." "I hope they do," she whispered, curling into her blanket. "I think we're helping them." Rhett leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Maybe they're helping us too." When he stepped outside, he found Zara on the porch again, hood up, arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just stood beside her. The two of them looked out into the night at the faint stars breaking through clouds, at the soft glow of the porch light, bathing the steps in amber. A light that had been waiting. A light now shared. Zara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug. Steam rose from the coffee untouched. Across from her, a stack of paperwork, lay half-filled government forms, service records, proof of discharge application numbers that never seemed to mean anything. She stared at the envelope in her hand, Department of Veterans Affairs printed in faint gray across the top. It was the 5th time she'd opened a letter from them in the last 6 months. And the 5th time it said the same thing. "We regret to inform you that housing assistance cannot be granted at this time due to lack of availability. Your application remains in the queue." Queue. The word twisted something in her gut. She had spent 13 years in the Army, 3 deployments, 1 commendation for bravery, and now she was a name in a queue, dragging her daughter from couch to shelter, while watching others with louder voices and fewer years in uniform step ahead. Her jaw tensed. She folded the letter with military precision and slipped it under the stack, as if hiding it could somehow lessen the weight. That's when she noticed Rhett watching her from the doorway. He didn't say a word, just crossed his arms and leaned against the frame, his gaze calm and steady, like someone who'd learned long ago that sometimes silence was the kindest kind of listening. "You ever feel like the system wants you to disappear?" she asked, her voice low. "All the time," Rhett said, "especially after Marlene passed. It was like I stopped existing except for the bills. Those still came." She smirked faintly. "Some things never change." He stepped into the room and pulled out the chair across from her. "What's the plan now?" he asked. Zara sighed. "Keep calling. Keep applying. There's a transitional housing program 2 counties over, but it's full. They said check back in. 4 months. And until then, she looked up at him. Until then, I keep pretending I've got it handled for June's sake. There was no pity in his face, just that same quiet steadiness. The kind that didn't rush to fix, but made space for the truth to sit down and breathe. You don't have to pretend here, he said simply. Not with me. She blinked. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Before she could respond, the back door burst open, and 2 giggling girls rushed in, covered in grass stains and smelling like sunshine. Ellie held up a mason jar. Look, we caught lightning bugs. 3 whole ones, June added proudly. Rhett grinned. Make sure you let them go before dark. Those bugs have families too, you know. The girls dashed past into the living room, leaving a trail of laughter and dirt behind them. Zara exhaled. Sometimes I wonder how she keeps smiling. She's got you. That's how. She shook her head. I'm not sure that's enough. Rhett paused, then said quietly, It is. But just in case, she's got us now, too. That evening, after the girls had fallen asleep in their makeshift pillow fort, Rhett pulled a worn envelope from a drawer in the garage. He sat at his workbench, under the soft hum of an overhead bulb, staring at the letterhead for a long moment. It was the same letter Marlene had received 4 years ago, the one denying her coverage for an experimental treatment. Too expensive. Not medically necessary. By the time they changed their minds, it was too late. Rhett hadn't kept it out of bitterness. He kept it as a reminder that good people could fall through the cracks. He reached for a blank sheet and began to write. The next morning, Zara was surprised to find Rhett gone. A yellow sticky note sat on the coffee maker, took Ellie to school. Back soon. Coffee's strong. She chuckled softly. The man was predictable in a comforting kind of way. While June colored at the table, Zara stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sun just beginning to warm the dew off the railing. She stared out into the trees, letting the quiet settle. Then, like a ghost from the past, a memory rose the first time she held June after returning from Afghanistan. Her hands had still smelled of gunpowder, her body stiff from flight. But when June touched her face, she remembered what it meant to be human again. Now that same child had slept soundly for 3 nights in a row, laughed without flinching, trusted a new place, a new man, a new kind of family. And that scared Zara more than war ever had. She was starting to hope again, and hope she had learned was dangerous when you didn't know if it would stay. Rhett returned just before noon, carrying groceries in one arm and something else tucked under the other, a manila envelope. He placed it on the table without fanfare. I sent a letter, he said, to the mayor's office and to the local VA liaison. Told them what's going on. Mentioned the little girl who used to cry herself to sleep but now catches fireflies. Zara stared at him stunned. You didn't have to. No, he cut in. But someone has to. And I've got paper, a stamp, and a reason. She looked down, blinking fast. Thank you, she whispered. Rhett nodded once. You don't owe me anything. But if they do, I'll be ready to say yes. That night, as the girls watched cartoons curled together under a quilt, Zara found herself on the porch again. The lantern glowed like always. Rhett joined her, a cup of tea in his hand. You're not just helping, she said quietly. You're showing me what it looks like to be seen again. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I wasn't trying to show you anything, just trying to keep the light on. Figured someone might need it. Zara turned to him. Well, someone did. The Saturday Farmers Market in downtown Blue Hollow was the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon damp earth and memories. Wooden stalls lined the sidewalks, offering everything from honey and cornbread to lavender sachets and homemade pickles. Old men played fiddles on benches. Women sold peach jam out of the backs of pickup trucks. It was a good day. Blue sky, crisp air, just enough breeze to flutter the flags hanging from shop fronts. Zara should have felt at ease. She didn't. She stood beside Rhett at the produce stand, arms folded, eyes scanning every direction. Her back was straight, her feet slightly apart, the stance of someone who had once been trained to survive ambushes, not apple pie samples. June and Ellie were a few feet ahead, examining pumpkins too large for either to lift. They giggled over one shaped like a duck. "You okay?" Rhett asked, his voice low but steady. "I'm fine," she replied too quickly. Rhett didn't push. He picked up a jar of local honey and turned it over. "You don't have to stay," she muttered. "You could shop without us." "I could," he said. "But I'd rather be here." Zara's jaw tensed. A man in a camouflage cap walked by and nodded at her. She nodded back reflexively, then turned away before her throat could tighten. The smell of roasted peanuts hit her like a landmine. Suddenly she was back in Kabul. Dust and sweat. The heat of a roadside market. The scream of tires. Then the blast. She clenched the paper bag in her hand, fingers white. Zara Rhett stepped closer. She blinked hard. "I'm fine." "You're not." I said, But then her knees buckled slightly, and he caught her elbow just in time. People turned. Not many, but enough. Zara pulled away, cheeks flushed. "I need a minute." She walked quickly, not running, but almost down a side alley between the bakery and the barber shop. Found a quiet bench under a tree. Sat. Breathed. She hated this. She hated that the war still lived in her lungs, in her skin, in the smell of certain foods. She hated that her daughter had seen her stiffen like a statue. She hated the eyes that pitied her, the ones that whispered, "She looks so strong." What could be wrong? And most of all, she hated that she had let Rhett see it. Rhett approached slowly, careful not to crowd her. "You're not broken," he said gently, standing just far enough away. She didn't look at him. "Don't say that." "It's true. No. People want to think that. They want to believe soldiers come back and just become normal again. But we don't. We don't unsee what we've seen. We don't forget the smell of burning rubber and hair. We don't walk through pumpkin stands without wondering if there's something underneath." Rhett sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then, "You know I had to sleep on the floor for a year after Marlene passed. Couldn't stand the bed without her in it. Ellie used to think I was camping." Zara turned to him, startled. He continued, "I got real good at pretending everything was fine. I smiled at church, mowed the lawn, said the right things. But every day I walked around with this invisible cinder block on my chest. No one saw it, but I felt it. Every damn minute." She stared at him, and for the first time, she saw it, not just the kindness in Rhett's eyes, but the ache behind it. The grief that had quietly rearranged the furniture of his soul. He wasn't fixing her. He was showing her his own cracks. Her voice softened. "It's been 2 years," he nodded. "Do you still miss her every day? But it's different now. Like a song you once knew by heart. You still hum the melody, but doesn't hurt the same way anymore." Zara looked away. "I don't want to be someone who always needs saving." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're someone who survived. That's not weakness. That's a different kind of strength." They sat in silence as a soft wind rustled the leaves above them. Then June came skipping down the path, Ellie beside her. June ran straight to Zara and threw her arms around her neck. "Are you okay, Mama?" she asked. Zara held her tightly. "Yeah, baby. I just needed a minute." Ellie looked at Rhett. "Did she get dizzy like Grandma did?" Rhett crouched down. "No, honey. Sometimes grown-ups remember things really hard, and it makes their heads feel loud." Ellie seemed to accept that. The girls returned to the market hand in hand. Zara stood and dusted off her jeans. Thanks. For earlier. Rhett looked at her. You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep walking beside me. She studied him. You sure you want that? Yeah, he said. I really am. That night, back at the cabin, Zara opened her backpack and took out a weathered photo her squad from her last deployment. 3 of them were gone now. The others scattered across the country, stitched together by trauma and silence. She hadn't looked at this photo in months. Now she placed it on the nightstand, beside June's sketch of the cabin and a note that read, "You're my favorite grown-up besides Daddy." The war wasn't gone. The wounds weren't healed. But maybe she wasn't fighting alone anymore. And that, for the first time, felt like enough. Sunday mornings at the Callahan cabin had a rhythm, all their own, slower, softer, and wrapped in the scent of frying bacon and pine wood. It was the kind of day when nobody rushed where socks were optional, and coffee was poured more than once, just for the pleasure of it. Rhett was under the hood of his truck, elbows deep in grease, humming something that might have once been a country song. His flannel sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with oil and freckles. Zara watched him from the porch steps, sipping her second cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The girls were building a fort out of firewood and tarps nearby, giggling like wild things. It had been almost a week since the market, since the alley, since the confession, since Rhett saw her raw and didn't turn away. Zara still didn't know exactly what this was, this temporary pause in the storm, but she wasn't in a hurry to define it. Peace, however fleeting, was a luxury she hadn't had in years. "You planning to stare me into fixing it faster?" Rhett called out, wiping his hands on a rag. She smirked. "That depends. You planning to fix it today, or just serenade it with country humming until it gives up?" He grinned. "You'd be surprised what a good chorus can do to a rusty starter." Zara stood, walked over and peered under the hood. "That's your solenoid relay." "It's loose." Rhett raised an eyebrow. "You know cars I spent 3 months stationed with a convoy in Kuwait. If you couldn't change a fuel filter, you didn't get dinner." Rhett stepped aside. "Be my guest, Sergeant." She took the wrench from him and adjusted the relay with practiced ease. Her movements were precise, economical, like everything else about her. "You're good at this," he said. "Better than baking." Now that's tragic. She laughed, a sound so rare it startled them both. It was short, light, but full of something that had been missing for too long. By noon, the truck was humming. The girls had moved on to painting rocks with glitter, and Rhett had started making grilled cheese sandwiches for everyone. "Your dad's kind of awesome, June," said to Ellie as they dipped paintbrushes into mismatched jars. Ellie beamed. "He makes the best peanut butter and jelly, too. But don't tell him. I said that." Zara overheard and smiled to herself. Watching June talk like that, openly, joyfully, was like seeing the petals of a long dormant flower begin to bloom again. Inside the kitchen, Rhett flipped sandwiches and hummed again, this time a tune Zara recognized. "Is that gentle on my mind?" she asked, walking in with a tray of painted rocks. He looked up. "You know Glenn Campbell. My dad used to play him on vinyl every Sunday morning while making pancakes." Rhett nodded. "I like the way he sang about quiet things, like they mattered." Zara leaned against the counter. Quiet things do matter. Their eyes met, not intensely, not dramatically, but with the kind of familiarity that surprised them both. It was Rhett who broke the moment, plating sandwiches with a grin. "Lunch is served. Gourmet chef style, diagonally sliced, no crusts, just like the girls demand." Zara laughed again. "You've been trained well." After lunch, Ellie begged Rhett to tell one of his garage stories, a tradition he used to share with Marlene and their daughter on slow Sundays. Zara sat cross-legged on the rug, June curled beside her. Rhett pulled up his old rocking chair, cleared his throat dramatically, and began. Once upon a time, in a garage far, far away, there was a pickup truck named Bessie, who thought she was a race car. His voice was animated, his gestures theatrical. He told tales of oil spills that turned into river's wrenches that could talk and spark plugs that sang the blues. The girls howled with laughter. Even Zara chuckled despite herself. Halfway through the second story, a suspenseful tale involving a haunted carburetor, she caught herself watching him, not with guarded observation, but with something closer to admiration. He was somehow both grounded and magical. Later, while the girls napped in a heap of blankets and glue sticks, Zara stood with Rhett on the back porch, watching the late autumn sun start to dip behind the pines. "You're good with them," she said quietly. "With Ellie, with both." Rhett shrugged. "I guess kids need the same thing adults do, someone to see them. Really see them." Zara turned toward him. "You know, I've never had a Sunday like this, not even growing up. My mom worked 2 jobs. Dad left when I was 5. Most Sundays were just silent." Rhett nodded. "Silent can be heavy." "Yeah," she whispered. "Sometimes it still is." He was quiet a moment, then said, "Well, I hope this one felt different." "It did," she said. "It really did." And for once there was no awkwardness, no pretense. Just 2 people standing in the golden hush of late afternoon, letting the warmth of something unspoken settle between them. That night, after the girls were in bed and the house had gone still, Zara stood by the window in the guest room, looking out at the porch light. Still glowing, still warm, still waiting. She turned and noticed something on the dresser, a small note written in crayon. It was from Ellie. "Dear Miss Zara, you fixed Daddy's truck. That means you're part of our team. Love, Ellie and June, too." Zara sat down slowly, the note trembling in her hand. She had carried a duffel bag for years, packed with survival. But now someone had handed her something else. Belonging. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to leave it behind. The call came just after dusk. Zara was folding laundry in the quiet hum of the guest room, the scent of lavender detergent still clinging to warm cotton, when her phone vibrated against the windowsill. She picked it up without checking the caller ID, assuming it was another spam number or a delayed caseworker. But the voice on the other end froze her in place. "Zara, it's Lieutenant Colin Griggs. You got a minute?" She hadn't heard his voice in over 2 years, not since they both boarded different flights out of Kandahar. Zara sat down slowly. "Colin. God, I thought you were—" "In Arizona I was. Transferred. I'm with the Rapid Response Division now. But this isn't a social call." She knew that tone. That clipped, clean, no time for small talk voice. "What's going on?" "We need field instructors for a critical 6-week cycle in Colorado. Vets only. Combat experience preferred. It's mental health-focused trauma integration, recovery readiness. You'd be perfect for it." Zara swallowed. "Colin, I've got June, and we're not in a place to just relocate. I get that. But this isn't deployment, it's transitional. You'd have weekends. There's on-base housing for kids. Look, you were always the one who held the team together. We need someone the new recruits will trust." Zara glanced toward the hallway, where she could hear the soft murmurs of Rhett reading Ellie and June a bedtime story. It felt like 2 lives bleeding into each other, and she was standing at the intersection. "Just think about it," Colin said, softer now. "You told me once you didn't know how to be a civilian. Maybe this is how you figure it out, by helping the next wave make it through." She ended the call with a promise to consider it. But her heart was already at war. She didn't tell Rhett that night. Couldn't. Not yet. He was in his element barefoot on the porch, sipping tea and watching the stars, like they meant something personal to him. She stood behind the screen door just watching. How do you tell someone who's given you quiet healing and safety that you might walk away from it? Instead, she stepped outside, leaned against the rail, and said nothing. He didn't press her, just passed her the second mug and let the silence stretch between them like an old quilt, worn, comforting, familiar. But her mind kept circling. Could she leave even temporarily? What would that do to June, who was finally laughing again? And Rhett, who had never asked her to stay, but who looked at her now as if home didn't feel full without her in it. She went to bed that night with questions that didn't sleep. The next morning, Zara rose early and found June already awake, curled on the couch with Ellie watching cartoons. Mama June said sleepily, "Did you know frogs can freeze and still come back alive in spring?" Zara blinked. "I did not know that." "It's real," June said. "I read it in Ellie's science book. They don't die. They just go quiet for a while." Zara sat beside her daughter, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Is that how you felt last year?" Quiet June nodded, small and solemn. "And now, I think I'm thawing." The words hit Zara with quiet force. This place, this life, it had started the thaw for both of them. She couldn't ignore that. But she also couldn't ignore the part of her that still felt called to serve, not out of duty, but out of purpose. That afternoon, Zara found Rhett outside building a raised garden bed. He wore gloves and a stubborn smile, hammering away at wooden planks, like the earth itself had challenged him. "You know winter's coming, right?" she asked. "I believe in getting a head start," he said. "Plus, Ellie says she wants to grow carrots big enough to feed a bear." Zara smiled, then took a breath. "I got a call last night," she said. "From someone I served with." Rhett paused, looked up. "Yeah, they're building a program for soldiers transitioning out of combat. They want me to teach. It's 6 weeks in Colorado. Not a full deployment, just temporary." He stood, dusted off his hands, and nodded slowly. "What did you tell them that I'd think about it?" He studied her. "And what are you thinking I don't know?" she admitted. "Part of me wants to say yes. It's important. I know what that kind of program can do. And I'd be helping people like me. Like I was. And the other part..." She met his gaze. "The other part doesn't want to leave this. You. June finally sleeps through the night. I finally sleep through the night." Rhett didn't answer right away. Then gently, "Zara, I won't ask you to stay. That's not love. That's fear." She swallowed hard. "But I also won't pretend it wouldn't matter," he added. "It would. It does." Tears welled in her eyes. "What if I go and everything changes?" "Then it changes," he said. "But maybe that's not the end of something. Maybe it's just part of becoming something better." She stepped closer. "Would you wait for me? I already have," he said softly. "Not just for you, for the chance to feel something real again." "So yeah, I'd wait." Zara pressed her forehead to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like he meant it for forever, even if it had to start with goodbye. That night, she sat beside June, who was half asleep under her covers. "Mama," the girl whispered. "Do you have to go?" Zara hesitated. "For a little while, maybe. But I'd come back." June blinked up at her. "Promise." Zara kissed her forehead. "Cross my heart." Then she went to the porch and lit the lantern herself. It glowed brighter than ever. A signal, a prayer, a vow. The quiet came slowly, like dust settling after a storm. Zara and June left just after dawn, before the sun had fully risen over the pines, before the girls had a chance to fall apart in each other's arms. Goodbyes, Zara had said, were best done with hugs and not tears, though even that was a hard sell. June clung to Ellie like a second skin, her glitter-painted backpack bouncing with every step to the truck. Rhett watched the taillights disappear down the gravel road with a stillness that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with stunned grief. The porch light stayed on, of course. That night, Rhett sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea he didn't drink, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. There was no dinner conversation, no crayons scattered across the floor, no giggling from behind the couch, just the echo of footsteps that were no longer there, and the faint smell of Zara's shampoo lingering like a question. Ellie walked into the room in her pajamas, holding a photo she'd drawn 4 stick figures, holding hands, one of them taller, with a long braid. She said 6 weeks, Ellie murmured. But what if she forgets? Rhett reached out and pulled her into his lap. She won't forget kiddo. She's doing something brave, something important. She was important here. He kissed the top of her head, blinking hard. Yeah, she was. In the days that followed, Rhett did his best to fill the space. He packed Ellie's lunches with extra care, took her on bike rides through the park, taught her how to check the oil in the truck. But every time he passed the guest room, still neat, still smelling faintly of lavender and iron, he felt something come loose in his chest. He had once believed love was a one-time thing, that what he had with Marlene could never be replicated, only remembered. And maybe that was true. But now he realized love wasn't a shape, it was a light, and different people carried it differently. Zara had brought hers like a torch, bright, intense, hard-earned. And now the porch light she left behind glowed like a candle waiting in the window. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was hand-addressed in messy block print. Rhett opened it slowly, careful not to tear the corners. Inside was a drawing, another from June. This time it showed 4 stick figures again, but 2 of them were waving from an airplane. Below was a short message in crayon. We miss you. Mama says hi. I got to hold a puppy. I didn't cry today. I hope Ellie still likes frogs. Love, June. Rhett turned the paper over and found a note scribbled in blue ink. Hey, it's tough here. Some days are harder than I thought they'd be. The soldiers we're working with are younger than I expected, some barely 20, already carrying enough pain to fill a lifetime. But they're listening, and I think that's what matters most. Tell Ellie she's brave, and tell yourself the same. I'll be home before the frost thaws. Rhett read it twice, then a third time, each word settling like warmth under his ribs. That night, Ellie found him in the garage polishing the old guitar Marlene had once played. He hadn't touched it in years, but something in Zara's letter, or maybe in the silence itself, made him want to remember the sound of music again. Will you play the one Mama used to sing? Ellie asked, climbing onto the workbench. He hesitated, fingers stilling on the strings. Then he nodded. The chords came back slowly, like a language half forgotten. The road is long, the sky is wide, but hearts remember where love hides. Ellie leaned against his shoulder, and for a moment the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of memory, of waiting, of something almost holy. The next week passed in routines that felt both familiar and strange. Rhett began cooking meals again. Real meals, not just grilled cheese and scrambled eggs. He cleaned the porch, repainted the shed, fixed the door to the guest room, even though no one was sleeping in it. And every night before locking up, he turned on the porch light, even when it rained, even when no cars passed, even when he wasn't sure if it mattered. One night Ellie asked, "Do you think she sees it?" Rhett smiled, maybe not with her eyes, but I think she feels it. It was almost 3 weeks in when Rhett opened the fridge and saw the last jar of peach jam Zara had bought from the market, the one she said reminded her of Sunday mornings with her dad. He stared at it for a long moment, then reached for a spoon. The first taste was too sweet, the second somehow perfect. He walked to the back porch and sat down, the jar in one hand, watching the trees sway under the setting sun. He missed her. Not just her presence, but her certainty, her sarcasm, her way of looking at life like it owed her nothing, and she owed it nothing back, and yet still finding a reason to give it all she had. He missed June's questions, the way she'd slide into a room like a whisper and leave behind a ripple of wonder. But what surprised him most was how their absence hadn't broken him. It had stretched him, made space for something deeper. Waiting, he realized, wasn't empty. Waiting was its own kind of love. That night, Ellie placed a crayon drawing on the porch steps, two hearts side by side beneath a glowing lamp. "She'll come back," she said. "I just know it." And Rhett, looking at the soft light spilling across the porch, simply nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I know it too." The air had turned colder in Blue Hollow. It wasn't winter yet, but it had begun to whisper its approach in the way the wind curled beneath the eaves and how the trees dropped their leaves with the weariness of something that had held on too long. Inside the cabin, the evening was quiet, not empty, just still. Rhett stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of chili, the scent of cumin and tomatoes wrapping around the room like a blanket. Ellie was in the living room, sprawled across the rug with a book open beside her and a blanket tangled at her feet. It had been exactly 24 days since Zara and June had left, but Rhett hadn't counted, not out loud anyway. He moved through the house the way a man moves through memory, slowly, gently, always aware of the things that were once there. The guest room door remained ajar, the porch light still burned, and the letter from Zara, now folded and worn from rereading, stayed tucked inside his wallet, close enough to touch. That evening, Ellie surprised him with a question he hadn't prepared for. "Do you think she'll come back and still want us?" Rhett looked up from his bowl. "What do you mean? I mean, maybe she'll like her new job better. Maybe she'll meet someone. Maybe she'll forget." He set his spoon down and walked over to her, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Love doesn't forget," he said. "It stretches sometimes. It waits. It gets tested. But if it's real, it always finds its way back." Ellie nodded slowly, then leaned into him. "I hope it's real." He smiled, brushing a hand over her hair. "Me too, kiddo." Later that night, Rhett stood on the porch, steaming mug in hand, staring into the woods beyond the gravel road. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees, like a hymn too old for words. He thought about calling Zara again just to hear her voice, but something stopped him. She needed space to do what she was doing, to stand in the fullness of her purpose without feeling tethered to the weight of someone else's waiting. He would let her come back when and if she was ready. He turned to go inside. That's when he heard it. "Knock! Knock!" He froze. Two soft knocks, not hurried, not uncertain, just there. Real. Present. The kind of knock that doesn't ask permission but also doesn't demand. He opened the door, and there they were. Zara stood in the glow of the porch light, damp from the night air, wearing jeans and her old army field jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her face tired, but bright, like someone who'd come home from a long, hard journey and knew exactly why she made it. Beside her stood June, one hand gripping the strap of her tiny backpack, the other clutching a paper flower. Neither of them spoke, and neither had to. Rhett stepped aside. Zara crossed the threshold. June ran straight into Ellie's arms without a word, both girls disappearing into a mess of squeals, hugs, and hurried storytelling. Rhett and Zara stood just inside the door, the air between them charged and warm. "You came back," he said. "I didn't want to leave forever," she replied. "But I had to know if I could still do it. Still give something of myself without losing everything else." "And did you?" She nodded. "I did. But only because I knew this was waiting." He stepped closer. You didn't call. I was afraid if I heard your voice, I'd come back too soon. His smile was soft. Is there such a thing? She took a breath. I don't think so anymore. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Nothing dramatic, no sweeping music. Just two people standing in the center of a quiet night, acknowledging that some things, some people are worth returning for. Then Rhett said, "You hungry?" Zara laughed, relief spilling into her shoulders. "Depends. Still got chili. I always keep a pot on when the light's on." Later, after the girls had fallen asleep in the guest room, they now called theirs Zara, sat with Rhett on the back porch, wrapped in one of Marlene's old blankets. She held the mug of tea he had handed her, like it was sacred. "You know," she murmured for the first time in years. "I'm not planning my next move. I'm not wondering where we'll be in 6 months, or who I'll have to explain myself to next." He looked at her, the side of his face, lit by the soft yellow porch light. "What are you doing instead?" She smiled. "I'm just here. With you. With us." There was no kiss, no declaration, only stillness, and the unmistakable feeling of home. That night, before heading to bed, Rhett did what he always did, stepped onto the porch one last time. The wind had died down. The trees stood still. And though she was already inside, already returned already. His again, in all the unspoken ways that mattered, he left the porch light on. Not because she needed it anymore, but because he did. By the second week of November, the town of Blue Hollow had shifted into a palette of burnt orange amber and soft gray. Smoke from chimneys curled above rooftops, like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Locals bundled in flannel and fleece strolled the sidewalks, sipping cider and nodding to each other with the rhythm of people who knew their neighbors by name and truck model. Zara wasn't sure she belonged yet, but she was starting to believe it might be possible. She had accepted a part-time position with the county emergency services, offering logistical support and field training for volunteer responders. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and more importantly, it was hers. That Tuesday morning, she arrived early at the town's elementary school for a scheduled fire drill. She had helped plan the evacuation protocol the week before and was there to observe how well the school staff executed it. She wore her navy blue EMS windbreaker boots, laced tight hair, pulled back, not for vanity, but for order, for control. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, clipboard in hand, while children filed out of classrooms in semi-orderly rows, teachers guiding them with practiced calm. Ellie spotted her from across the yard and waved with the kind of excitement only a child could offer without shame. Zara lifted a hand in return, surprised by the warm twist in her chest. She had always been respected in uniform, but this was the first time she felt seen. Everything was going according to plan until the alarm stopped. That was the first sign. Then a teacher shouted, "Smoke East Wing." In an instant, simulation became reality. Zara dropped the clipboard and ran. Through the courtyard, past the frozen faces of children who sensed that something had shifted in the script. Through the side entrance, where smoke curled low along the hallway floor. 2 students, unaccounted for a teacher, cried behind her. Zara didn't hesitate. Her training surged forward, precise and automatic. She crouched low, pulled the collar of her jacket over her nose, and entered the smoke-drenched hallway. Heat clung to the walls, not yet fire, but clothes the kind that suggested wires burning or an old HVAC unit failing fast. In a corner beneath a row of lockers, 2 second graders huddled, eyes wide and terrified. "It's okay," she said, firmly, calmly. "You're coming with me now." She scooped them up, one on each arm, and navigated her way out by memory. Left past the art room, right at the double doors. Her eyes stung. Her legs screamed. But she moved forward steady as stone. When she emerged into daylight, The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Not loud, not orchestrated, just honest. Zara blinked against the brightness and knelt, checking both kids for burns. They were coughing, but safe. A paramedic rushed over to take them. Rhett appeared moments later, Ellie in tow, her eyes full of both pride and worry. "You okay?" he asked, voice low and rough. Zara nodded, catching her breath. "Couple scared kids. That's all. You went straight in. They didn't know what to do. I did." He looked at her like she was both terrifying and magnificent. "You're something else." Zara managed a wry smile. "Told you I don't bake." Later that evening, the story had made its way through town. A former soldier turned emergency services trainer had rushed into a smoke-filled building to rescue 2 students. No hesitation. No spotlight. Just instinct. The school's principal called Zara personally. The mayor's office left a voicemail. Even the grumpy hardware store owner nodded at her respectfully the next day. But none of it mattered more than the card Ellie handed her at dinner. It was drawn in marker and glitter. Glue, shaky but heartfelt. "Thank you for saving the kids. You're my hero. Love, Ellie." Zara folded it carefully and tucked it into her wallet. She'd carried medals before. This felt better. That night, she and Rhett sat outside beneath a sky that had cleared into perfect stars. He handed her a fresh cup of tea, cinnamon and vanilla. Her favorite. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said softly. I really am." There was a long pause. Not awkward. Just full. "Today," he said, "finally you reminded people what courage looks like. Not just in battlefields. But right here, in the middle of a school day. I didn't do it for recognition. I know. That's why it matters." She turned to him, her face half shadowed in porch light. "Rhett, I used to think I was only useful when I was risking something. That if I wasn't saving someone, I wasn't worth much. And now I think maybe. I don't have to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not even to myself." He nodded. "You don't. Not here. Not with us." Zara looked at the porch light still glowing steadily. "You always keep that on, even when you were gone." "Why?" He smiled. "Because you hadn't said goodbye." She leaned into him, then resting her head against his shoulder. He slipped his arm around her without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I know. They sat that way for a long time. No more fire alarms, no more proving, just presence. And peace." The first frost of the season arrived like a sigh, quiet, soft, and undeniable. The grass glistened silver beneath the morning sun, the trees stood bare and unashamed, and the sky clear and breathless, stretched endlessly above Blue Hollow. Inside the Callahan cabin, warmth came not from the fireplace, but from something deeper. Zara had begun leaving her duffel bag unpacked. June had stopped asking if they were leaving soon, and Rhett had started setting 4 plates at the dinner table without thinking twice. It wasn't official. No papers had been signed. No promises had been carved into rings. But something sacred had settled between the 4 of them, not just cohabitation, but commitment. Still, there were things left unsaid. Until that Sunday. The day began with pancakes. Rhett made them from scratch, humming as he moved through the kitchen in his favorite faded flannel. Ellie cracked the eggs with dramatic flair, while June appointed herself official syrup tester. Zara leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand, watching them with a half-smile tugging at her mouth. "I don't think this kitchen has ever been so loud," she teased. "That's because it finally has proper staff," Rhett replied, flipping a pancake with a flourish. "Staff who demands hazard pay in the form of chocolate chips," Ellie added, grinning. Zara laughed, and for a fleeting second, she saw a version of herself she barely recognized, relaxed, rooted, loved. That afternoon, Rhett led them outside to the backyard, a small box tucked under his arm. I've been thinking he said gathering everyone near the raised garden beds, now covered in burlap for winter. We've done a lot of building this year, forts, routines, chili recipes. But we haven't built something together. He set the box down and opened it, revealing 4 wooden posts rope and a set of hand-painted signs. Zara raised an eyebrow. A fence? Nope. He lifted one of the signs. It read, Team Porch Light, Est. This fall. Ellie squealed. A fort flag better, Rhett said. It's a backyard promise post, he explained as he began hammering the first stake into the ground. Each of us gets to make one promise to the family, big or small, and we write it down, tie it to the post, and keep it. Zara looked at him, heart quietly catching in her chest. It was such a Rhett thing, no speeches, no theatrics, just quiet depth disguised as simplicity. All right, she said. I'm in. They each took a piece of waterproof paper and a marker. Ellie went first. I promise to help June if she gets scared at night, even if I'm sleepy. June followed. I promise to never hide the cookies without sharing. Rhett cleared his throat. I promise to always keep the porch light on, not just the real one, but the one in my heart, for all of you. Zara stared at her blank page for a long time. Then carefully she wrote, I promise not to run when love gets too quiet. I'll stay, even when it's hard. They tied the papers with string and watched them flutter gently in the wind. It wasn't legal, but it was binding in all the ways that mattered. That evening after dinner, the girls begged for one last story by the fireplace. Rhett, in his element, began crafting a tale about a family of owls who built a nest on top of a porch light and protected the whole forest. June curled up beside Zara. Ellie lay across Rhett's lap. The fire crackled and popped like applause. When the story ended and the girls were tucked into their now shared room, Zara found Rhett out on the porch, staring into the night. She stepped beside him, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. You ever think about what comes next? She asked. Every day. And I think we're in it. She looked at him. You ever miss the days when everything felt certain? He turned to her, eyes clear. No, because they weren't. I just didn't know it then. She smiled faintly. I used to think I'd never be anyone's soft place to land, that I'd always be someone people leaned on, but never leaned toward. Well, he said you've been mine. Her breath caught. And then, for the first time since they met, he kissed her slow and sure, without hesitation or apology. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just full of everything they'd built in silence and laughter and late-night tea. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. Are you asking me to stay? No, he whispered. I'm asking if you already have. Zara smiled. Yeah, Rhett. I have. Later, as the porch light glowed behind them, Rhett carried a second mug of tea out to where she stood, now bundled in one of his old sweatshirts. Can I ask something? He said. Sure. What made you come back that night? You knocked. She thought about it for a moment. Then I remembered something June said. About frogs. He blinked. Frogs. She said they freeze in winter and thaw in spring, that they come back to life even after being still for so long. And I realized I'd been frozen too. But something about this place, this family, it started to thaw me. She looked up at him. I didn't want to refreeze. He took her hand. Then we'll keep the light on. The cabin in Blue Hollow had never looked more alive. By spring, the garden Rhett once planted on a whim now brimmed with new growth rows of carrots, cherry tomatoes, and 2 sunflowers planted by Ellie and June that had no intention of growing in straight lines. Laughter spilled out of the open windows, shoes piled by the door like a declaration of belonging. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and pine clung to the air, the scent of home not defined by wallpaper or square footage, but by the people who filled it with breath and meaning. Zara stood barefoot on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the girls draw chalk hearts on the driveway. Rhett sat on the steps, guitar in his lap, lazily strumming something soft and familiar. She didn't recognize the tune, but the mood was unmistakable contentment, steady and sure. For the first time in years, Zara had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. The noise inside her, the need to keep moving to never get too attached to prepare for everything to fall apart, had quieted. She hadn't just stayed. She had landed. That weekend, the family hosted a small backyard picnic, a mix of neighbors Rhett's childhood friend from up the road, 2 women from the school board, and even Colin Griggs, who stopped by while passing through on his way to Raleigh. Colin brought June a stuffed turtle from the base gift shop and shook Rhett's hand with the kind of quiet respect that men like them rarely expressed aloud. "You did good, Zara," he said before leaving. "You found something most of us never do." She smiled, glancing at Rhett and the girls. "Yeah, I did." After sunset, they lit a small fire in the backyard pit. The girls roasted marshmallows while Rhett and Zara sat beneath a patchwork blanket, their legs intertwined, their shoulders touching with the ease of long familiarity. "Do you ever think about what your life used to be?" she asked softly. Rhett poked the fire with a stick. "Sometimes, but it feels like remembering someone else's story." She nodded. "Me too. I look at June now and she's light again. That used to feel impossible." Rhett looked at her. "You gave her that." "No," Zara said, smiling. "We all did." They fell quiet again, watching sparks rise into the star-scattered sky. Inside the cabin above the mantel, a new photo had joined the old frames. It showed the 4 of them on the porch steps, Ellie and June grinning wildly, Rhett mid-laugh, and Zara with one hand on Rhett's knee, the other resting on June's shoulder. Behind them, the porch light glowed amber against the twilight. Underneath, in careful script, the photo was labeled Team Porch Light. "S. This fall." One morning after the girls had gone to school, and the world was still yawning awake, Rhett walked into the kitchen to find Zara at the table, a small manila envelope beside her. She was holding a postcard. He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "It's from a sergeant I trained in Colorado. She's leading a new trauma support unit outside Dallas. Said I gave her back her footing." Rhett smiled. "I'm not surprised. She asked if I'd come help start a new cycle this fall." He paused. "And I told her I'd think about it. But only if it doesn't mean leaving again." He stepped forward. "So we'd go with you, if we go," she said carefully. "We go together. That's the only way I move now." He took her hand. "Then I'll follow wherever that light leads." That night, as twilight draped the yard in its blue hush, Zara and Rhett stepped outside, watching the girls chase fireflies with glass jars and giggles. Zara turned to him. "Do you remember when you first turned on that porch light?" He nodded. "The night I buried Marlene. I came home and the house felt hollow. I couldn't sleep, so I walked outside and flipped the switch. Didn't even know why." He paused, then looked at her. Maybe part of me was hoping someone might see it. She leaned into him, head on his shoulder. I did, and still, the porch light glowed. Not because someone was lost, not because someone was leaving, but because it had become a symbol of everything they had built, of promises, kept of doors left open, of love that refused to vanish in the dark. Rhett placed his hand over hers. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that night?" Zara looked out into the soft darkness and shook her head. "I don't wonder. Because we're here now. And sometimes, the miracle isn't what you missed. It's what you found." She stepped forward, and with practiced care flicked the porch light switch off just for a moment, then on again, just because she could, just because she wanted to. The light, as always, answered. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. Truly. We'd love to know where in the world are you watching from today. Drop a comment below and share a little piece of your story with us. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness, of second chances, or simply of what it means to be human, consider subscribing. We share stories like this to bring warmth and meaning to the everyday. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep the light on for someone who may need it. Thanks for watching.